All right, folks, we're right at 1:30, and I'm going to get us started this afternoon. If you are here for the Indian Wells General Plan Update Workshop, you are in the right place. We're glad to have you with us this afternoon. I'll be walking through just a couple introduction remarks here and how to use the platform. I'm sure we'll have many more people join us as we get started, but I wanted to make sure we are starting with you all on time here. So I'm sure in the last year, as everyone's gotten used to COVID and working from home, many people have been using Zoom over the past year. But for folks who are new to the platform, I wanted to walk you through a little bit of what the features could look like for you. Sometimes the way the platform is set up, it might look different for everyone's screen, but I wanted to walk through a couple things that we'll be using today. So I personally like to see everything side by side on Zoom. So if you go up to the top of the screen, you'll see that I'm sharing my screen, so you're viewing Jenna Tourget's screen. If you click on view options, you can click on view side by side, and this will let you see the videos on one side and the presentation in the middle of the screen. You can also see the folks who have joined us today, names on the right-hand side. You'll have an opportunity later, if you would like, to raise and lower your hand for me to unmute you as we have time for conversation later in the workshop today. There's the chat button at the bottom of the screen. There might also be a button for you that says reactions, and your raise hand button might be in the reactions tab as well. For your audio settings, I like to call into workshops or to Zoom meetings because sometimes the bandwidth at my house might not be as great. And if it is for you and you're experiencing some technical issues, I'd encourage you to see if you could use the dial-in information, or if you have any technical difficulties, Christian Mendez from the Crimson West team will be here to help you out as well. He's sending some messages through chat, and so if you do have any technical difficulties, please let us know. Again, my name is Jenna Tourget. I'm with Crimson West, and I'm your facilitator for this workshop. I always like to start with a guide for a productive workshop to just set us all up on the same page. Just like if we were in an in-person meeting, in a Zoom meeting, there's good ways for us to interact with each other and have a really productive community meeting. And first and foremost, I want to say we are happy and excited that you're here with us this afternoon. And we want you to know that we want your active participation and we need your input as part of the process. And so whether you use the chat box or you raise your hand, we want to hear from you today. We ask that you listen for understanding for other people's perspectives, that you can respect differences, and most of all, have fun. We have a really interactive workshop today, and I really look forward to hearing from folks about your perspectives, especially on community health in Indian Wells. As a reminder, this workshop is recorded and will be posted on indianwells.generalplan.org later in the week. And so if you missed some of this, you could always review it later as well. In that same vein, it is recorded. And so if you do have any, if you do unmute yourself, just know that your voice will be recorded as part of the record as well. We're going to begin, as we are right now, with a welcome and introductions. We'll then do an overview of the general plan update and walk through your definition of what community health means. We'll then talk about the overlap between what the general plan is and what community health is. Do a wrap up and next steps, and if there's time after, we'll do some question and answer for just general questions about the general plan. I'm going to turn it over to John Berg to do introductions for the city staff and team. John, over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Jenna. And welcome to the City of Indian Wells General Plan Workshop. We're glad to have you here, as Jenna mentioned. We wish we could be together in person, but as we know, over the last year, things have been anything but normal. First off, I would like to take the opportunity to introduce members of the city team and the consultant team. My name is John Berg. I'm the Community Development Director, and I'm joined here today by Luis Rubaclava. He's our Assistant Planner. Michaela Wilkie is a Management Analyst. I have Todd Leishman on the line, who is with the City Attorney's Office. And from the the consultant team, De Nova Planning Group, we have Amanda Tropiano and Megan Thorne. And Kearns and West, we have Jenna Torje, who you just met, and Christian Mendes. They're our facilitators today. We also have, I see, Kimberly Music, who is a council member for the city. She is online today with us. And John Schleimer, Planning Commissioner, is also with us today. This is our second workshop, and our first one dealt with visioning and values of the city as we move into the future. This one is going to focus more on the health and wellness aspects of our community. This process is dynamic and it will extend through the next year. And during that time, we will continue to gather your valuable input to ensure that we create a document that reflects the values of our affected residents and stakeholders. You are encouraged to also view the general plan website as another way to keep up to date information and also to view documents as they're completed. And as Jenna mentioned, that address is indianwells.generalplan.org. So you are encouraged to view that often and see some updates on that. The city appreciates you taking the time to be with us today because the success of these outreach efforts really does hinge on your attendance here at these meetings and also your participation. So on behalf of the city, I'm happy to welcome you all to the second general plan workshop and encourage you all to participate in the dialogue today. Let's have some dynamic discussions. I will now turn it back over to the facilitator, Jenna, and she'll walk us through some community introductions. Jenna?
Great, thank you. Great, thank you, John. So we can't be in person today, but I like to just remind us that we are community and that this is a community meeting. So I wanted to do a round of community introductions with folks on the call. So using the chat pod, and if you'd like to use your raise hand feature to test your mic and your mute and unmute, you can do that too. I'd love to see what your name is. If you unmute yourself, you can say your name and what brought you to Indian Wells. So anyone adding to the chat your name and what brought you to Indian Wells. And I'll call on 2 to 3 folks as folks raise their hand. Sometimes it just takes one person being brave too to use the raise hand button as well. All right, anyone wanting to test it out? Your name and what brought you to Indian Wells. And this is just a great way for us to know who's on this call today, who are your neighbors here, as we're gonna be talking about things that are really having to do specifically with Indian Wells. We wanna know, we want it to feel more like a community meeting and less like we're talking heads on a workshop as well. And if we don't get any, we can just move on. All right, so we'll move on to the next piece here. But I'm going to say this is a pretty interactive workshop. And so there's going to be, we're going to really want to hear from you, some of your thoughts on community health. And so even if you just want to test out that chat pod and send me a message that says hello, just so I know that people are here and can hear me and are able to engage today, that would be great. All right, I see John, our planning commissioner, and Linda saying hi. Thank you so much for saying hello, folks. So I know our chat pod's working, and I see a raised hand. Kimberly, I'm going to unmute you, and thank you so much for being the brave soul to say hi to us today. So you should be unmuted. Kimberly, what brought you to Indian Wells?
Well, I've lived in the Valley for 35 years, and I finally met my wonderful husband 5 years ago, and he lives in Indian Wells. So of course that brought me to Indian Wells, where I have loved every minute of these past 5 years. It's a great, wonderful city.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Kimberly, and congratulations on meeting your wonderful husband those 5 years ago. Great. And we also have a couple folks who, Amy and Sean, are new residents in the Indian Wells Country Club, and they're glad to be here in the community meeting. We have a member of city staff who's happy to be here as well. Julie says that they came for weather, views, tennis, and the great quality of life. Friendly neighbors who actually smile and get to know each other. And Julie, I want to say that is something that we're going to be talking about a lot today. And you just talked a lot about some of those definitions of community health. And so I appreciate you calling out those specific aspects of why you are in Indian Wells. And then Kim says, hello to everyone. I just want to thank you all for taking my prodding and sharing a little bit about yourself. It's really great to get us started today. Marcy, I see you, longtime visitor from Seattle, now year-round resident. Love opportunities to be outdoors. Marcy, great to hear from you. And then we have a business owner, Tammy, with CV Mosquito and Vector Control, just wanting to know about the ongoings in community. So it's great to have you all here. I really appreciate folks saying hello and joining in. So I'm going to turn it over to Amanda Trapiano from De Novo Planning, who's going to walk us through what the general plan update is for folks who didn't join last time or need a quick refresher. So Amanda, over to you.
This is Megan Thorne. I'm actually going to be
Hi, Megan.
Today. Hi, Jenna. I'm Megan Thorne with De Novo Planning Group. We're part of the consultant team that is partnering with the City of Indian Wells to guide Indian Wells through the general plan process. So in thinking about the general plan, first off, what is a general plan? A general plan is a long-term policy document that helps set the long-term vision for how the city is wanting to develop and grow and adapt over the next 20 years. So the state of California requires that every city and county in the state has a general plan, but every general plan is unique. Just like every city in California is unique, we want to make sure that Indian Wells general plan reflects your community values and goals and priorities. So that's really what we're going to be talking about today, specifically talking about community health and wellness. So once the general plan is completed, it's a document that city staff and elected officials and developers and community members like you can reference in making decisions about the city and its future. The housing element is a part of the general plan, but it's on a different update cycle. It is updated every 8 years, and that happens to be this year. It's being updated with a deadline of October 15th of 2021. So part of what's included in a general plan, there are some state required elements or chapters of a general plan. Those include land use, housing, transportation, open space, recreation, public safety, and noise. And then there's some additional optional elements that the City of Indian Wells has chosen to identify as important to the community of Indian Wells. And those are sustainability, community design, and community facilities. So why do we need to update the general plan? It's a big undertaking, but it's a very important document. And the last comprehensive update was in 1996. So that was a long time ago, and a lot has changed. There have been a lot of new requirements. There are state requirements that address housing issues, mobility, climate change, fire hazards, and environmental justice, just to name a few. And this is also a key opportunity to connect with community members like you to find out what matters to you, your values and priorities. We also want to help identify specific implementation items that can help bring those values and vision and turn them into reality. So just a quick summary of the process. We're at the beginning of the process where we're identifying community priorities and evaluating existing conditions, and community engagement will take place throughout the course of this project. So today we're here talking about just a specific portion of that, community health and wellness, but we will be engaging with you on an ongoing basis throughout the duration of this project. That includes considering land use alternatives, developing a draft policy document, conducting the environmental review, and then facilitating public meetings where that draft is reviewed and adopted. So we've had one outreach event already. Most of our outreach right now is all going on online because of COVID-19. But in the future, if there's potential to have in-person meetings, we'll of course reevaluate that as it's appropriate. But for now, we're conducting our outreach events online. Today, we're talking about community health and wellness, but there will be 2 more opportunities in the future, which we would love to hear from you. One of those is going to be about land use alternatives once we've come to that portion of the project. And then once there's a draft of the policy document, reviewing that and getting your comments on it. So we're so excited to have you here. We're really grateful for your engagement. Hearing from you is an important part of the process. So I'll turn it back to you, Jenna.
All right. Thank you so much, Megan. So to start us off today, I want to talk about the definition of community health and wellness. And I want to ask everyone here, how do you define community health? So you can use the chat box, you can use the raise hand feature and raise your hand and tell us how you define community health. But how do you define community health? And we're going to do kind of a fun thing here. I'm going to share my screen here, and we're going to pretend we're live in a workshop and take some sticky notes of how you define community health and be able to maybe group them together and get a strong definition here. So what does community health mean to you? You can use 1-word answers, 2-word answers. I've heard some already and how you got here. All right, I hear from Linda, connections and safety. All right, so connections. And Linda, if you want to just say, what do you mean by, what does connections mean to you? Does it mean connections between people? Does it mean connections to local facilities or the grocery store, or connections? So just thinking about those things. Anyone else? What is community health? Okay, so neighbors knowing each other and having friends, having those shared opportunities. I see Marcy mentioned inclusive of people, needs, and opportunities. Inclusive of people, needs, and opportunities. I love that. So it's that personal and social connection as part of health and community health. I see Julie mentioned fitness opportunities. So fitness opportunities as part of community health, that maybe people can access outdoors or gyms or different ways to have that physical health. See another mention of municipal managed attention to population health and safety needs. So I see that, and then also as I'm saying something, and if I'm not getting it right, definitely let me know. But maybe we could say that as the city is focused on health and safety as well. So those city services are providing that. And then I see someone mentioned community health can take various forms. So it could be financial health. So whether the city or community has financial health, that there's mental well-being. All right, I'm seeing some other definitions here that have to do more with noise and pollution and just environmental health. So whether there's clean water, the Salton Sea has solutions. Salton Sea impacts Indian Wells sometimes with the smell and with the pollution that might come from that. Climate action and environmental protection. All right, so that there's resources available for health here. We'll start grouping these a little bit here. All right, medical. So there's medical resources for health. So that could be whether we have hospitals or community health centers, but that there's that medical opportunity for health too. Any other definition of community health? What community health could be? All right, anyone want to raise their hand and say? I actually think this is a pretty strong list here. I'm going to have us head back and, oh, I see one more before we head back. Programs for physical activities. So that's the programming side from the city front here. So when we talk about community health or what a healthy community is, oftentimes like the official definition might be that the city or the people in the city have their basic needs met. So all residents have their basic needs met. And then also we have the quality and sustainability of the environment. So when we talked about pollution or noise or all of those aspects, that's that environmental health piece. But also that there's a provision for adequate levels of economic and social development. And it's always nice to see as someone who talks about community health that those social relationships were mentioned right up front with folks on the call here, that social relationships are supportive and respectful. So when we talk about community health, we're looking at really 4 key factors: the social aspects of community health, the economic aspects of community health, the environmental and physical, and how those all interact. So I wanted to, if we had created from our sticky note process a little earlier, our own map like this, we got a lot of these that we mentioned earlier. One note that I wanted to point out here that I didn't see was transportation options, so that there's ways to get around the city and ways for people to connect, whether it's biking or walking or in their cars or in public transportation. Access to healthy food, so that there's grocery stores or farmers markets or way for people to choose to eat healthy. That there's adequate housing for people of different income levels and different age groups as well. We heard access to healthcare, that there's medical facilities that people can access as well. Opportunities for physical activity. We heard that as fitness opportunities here. That there's education, social equity, safety, and I love, there's a siren in the background here. So if you hear a siren, it's coming from my side here. That there's supportive and respectful social relationships. Talked about the environmental piece of soil, air, water, and noise. Parks and open space. So parks and open space can be, if we're talking about the environmental piece, that there's adequate environmental health, but also those facilitate social interactions between people, especially during COVID right now. People having access to open space and having access to parks when being indoors together is not as easy as it can be. Aging in place. And so a lot of folks, maybe you own a nice big home that your family can be in and can grow up in. But part of the idea of aging in place is that if you decide to sell your home and downsize because you don't want the upkeep of it or you don't need the extra space, you can actually stay in the community where you have those social relationships and where you have access to the educational facilities that you like. And the medical facilities and those social interactions. So providing different levels of housing and opportunities for people to actually stay in the communities that they live in at different parts of their life. I've seen a couple more come in through the chat, so I'll bring those up as well. So I first want to say activities and fun. And I think that fun is so important as part of that community health. It hits that mental health, it hits fitness. So thank you so much for bringing fun in here. And I want to update this slide to add it as well. Addressing homelessness in surrounding areas. And so thinking about how those regional issues might impact in on Indian Wells and whether the city has resilient solutions for that. And dog parks. Who can forget our favorite members of our family in terms of dog parks? And then pickleball courts too. So pickleball courts is part of that parks open space and fitness activities. So for a general plan in healthy communities, like why are we talking about this when we're talking about the general plan? But really every aspect of the general plan really hits on community health. And so in a lot of cities, there might be a separate general plan element that is specifically about health. But I think here in Indian Wells, we're looking at how does health and wellness be integrated throughout this whole general plan document that looks at what's happening in the city over the next 20, 30 years. So for land use options, whether or not this would never happen in Indian Wells, but whether there's a factory or an industrial building next to housing. But it might be like, is there adequate zoning for open space in the city? For housing, is there housing for all people? Is there equitable housing opportunities? For resource management and conservation and open space, that we talked about a lot about how that impacts health and how health impacts that. The mobility element speaks about how people and goods can move through the city. And so if we're thinking about biking and walking, and in our community or other modes of transportation, maybe it's neighborhood electric vehicles or golf carts, thinking about mobility and how that impacts community health as well. So you can see there's a lot of aspects that community health integrates with the general plan. In Indian Wells, we're really looking at that sustainability element. It has healthy communities and economic development, and thinking about how those two are tied together for the sustainability of the city. So while there'll be a focus throughout the general plan, that one is the key piece that we'll be looking at for community health. I also saw a piece in the chat here about the arts being vital for community health, and I just want to say that I see that in there, and the arts and the way in which people can interact with each other and with art, the mental health, and then just what it brings to the city is really important as well. So thanks for adding that, Marcy. So we talked about healthy communities in general, and I want to take it from just what is a healthy community to what does healthy communities look like specifically in Indian Wells. So I'm going to go back to our sheet here, our board here, to talk about specifically community health in Indian Wells. So if you're thinking about your neighborhood or your street or just your city, what does it mean for Indian Wells to be a healthy city? And it might be something you've mentioned before, but thinking specifically to Indian Wells. And I'll give folks a minute to think about that. And maybe another way to ask this question is the way in which community health is applied maybe in Los Angeles or maybe in Riverside would be different than it would be applied in Indian Wells or in Indianapolis compared to Indian Wells. And so what does it look like in Indian Wells? So I see from Linda, community activities like Indian Wells has had in the past, encouraging a way to meet others in the area and social gatherings. So specifically in Indian Wells, having those community activities and social gatherings is important. Thank you so much, Linda. All right, municipal park spaces with the ability to sit and interact. So thinking about park spaces as open space, but also that community connection piece as well. All right, safe, clean, and happy place to live and interact with the community. Safe, clean, and happy. All right, I see municipal free tennis pickleball playground. And so I see we have a general plan element on community facilities. And so thinking about whether there are community facilities where people can have those interactions that maybe might not be within an HOA or a country club. So there's tennis, pickleball, playground that are provided by the city. All right, another piece I see here is welcoming and sense of belonging for full-time and part-time residents. I think that's such a great note on the city of Indian Wells, whether folks are part-time residents or live in the Valley or in Indian Wells full-time, having that welcoming and sense of belonging. And as you get deeper into thinking about what community health is and how valuable that feeling of belonging is, that you can maybe ask your neighbor, like I did yesterday, for cream for your coffee if you're if you're out, but also know that you are welcome in your community, and so you have that shared social interaction, but that you also belong in your community. All right, I see Julie getting a little more specific into land use. So future land use put towards spaces for parks, maybe a municipal lap pool, a dog park, soccer parks, basketball, tennis, pickleball. So those community facilities provided by the city, and using land use for that as well. And my colleague Christian noted that if you've joined by phone, you might not be able to write your answers in the chat, but if you dial *9, it'll let us know that you want to speak. And we would love for people to speak today. So if you press *9, it will let me know and I can unmute you there. All right, a couple different notes here. Let's see, a healthy community is prepared. So I could see a healthy community being prepared for maybe disaster or prepared for situations that are unknown. But it might be that a community is prepared for how residents will live there long term. So whether there's adequate facilities, adequate housing for people to stay in the community and choose to live there throughout their lives. So we're talking about the aging in place piece. So what does it look like to be able to have the range of resources available for folks to stay in their community? I see a supermarket and varied retail. So thinking about access to healthy food and access to shopping destinations. A library and art center, so thinking about the city being able to be a space where people can meet together and enjoy and appreciate how the beauty that art brings us. So if we're thinking about what Indian Wells could provide, I could also think about like, what does Indian Wells provide in terms of like a healthy community? So right now, does the city, like just a question for folks as you're writing responses, does the city support lifestyles for different ages? Are there amenities and shopping preferences for folks who are, who might be in different ages in Indian Wells? So thinking about that as you're providing your answer. What does a healthy community look like for Indian Wells for people at different age spectrums as well? All right, I see a couple points here. City is part of regional solutions. So thinking about Indian Wells within the context of the valley. So some of the resources that Indian Wells has, Paul called out in terms of the Indian Wells golf facilities and the tennis venue. It provides the ability for folks to interact and is unique in the Coachella Valley. The clubs have their own pools, so thinking about the benefit to folks who do live in those communities. And then thinking about the residence card and the amenities that provides and the way someone mentioned public information earlier as well. So someone mentioned there's an online space for folks to connect, but maybe not in person. And so how we can have that, that in-person piece. And from my question before of whether or not there is a range of resources and housing opportunities for different ages of folks in the community, someone mentioned an independent to dependent senior living facility. And so thinking about senior living for folks on who might need different types of services and resources. Someone mentioned they're not sure if we do provide amenities for non-seniors. So thinking about what those amenities can be, and maybe, I'm not sure if that's housing as well, if there's housing for folks on different levels of the spectrum of age and income as well. Another person mentioned walkability, so how to get around the city by walking, maybe walking trails, understanding the city's history within the valley. And then someone asked if this plan is based on demographics and how does that change over time? And so I think that's a great question. So thinking of who lives in Indian Wells now and how might that change over time? And I think the general plan does think about who lives in the community now and who might live in the community in the future. And that's the question of aging in place and the question of providing housing and resources for folks in different incomes and age ranges is helpful in thinking about what a healthy community is and how we're thinking about it. Man, you know, folks love pickleball. I gotta say, it's so fun to play. And so all ages of folks play pickleball and have dogs. And so those two amenities enhancing community health. And so thinking about whether there's community facilities that can actually provide that community health. All right, is there anyone who would like to just raise their hand and share a little bit about what a healthy community would look like in Indian Wells? I see here from Kathy that a lot of people have grandchildren too. So thinking about folks who might be older but still have their families in town or visiting or actually living in the valley as well, and what that looks like to be able to have resources and services for those family members. This is a quiet bunch today, and I'd love to hear from folks if you'd like to elaborate or if there's something I'm missing. We actually have a lot of responses here, but I think there can be a few more for what would make Indian Wells specifically a healthy community. I see a note on enabling the CV Link project, so maybe thinking about mobility as that relates to health. All right, city team, Amanda, is there anything that, Megan, is there anything that popped for you in our conversation so far that you want to elaborate on or ask folks deeper questions? I might like to hear a little more on from the person who mentioned the folks who have grandchildren too. Are you talking about providing for resources for housing and facilities, or if there be more, or if there's different ideas for what that means for folks, different types of families working here too? I see an interesting idea here as we're getting on a little bit. Could we work with the Hyatt to make their new slide park available to residents for a fee? So thinking about some of those resident amenities that might be tied to some private companies providing that as well. Julie mentions that there's, before I get to Julie, I asked a question about grandchildren. So facilities and opportunities for visiting grandchildren. So it could be people from outside Indian Wells as well. Julie mentions that there are more and more families with school-aged children moving here. We see more children on bikes and people pushing strollers every day. So thinking about the different types of opportunities as well. Amanda, I see your hand raised, and Amanda Tropiano from De Novo, I think you're unmuted. I don't have to do that. So if you want to add any items here.
Yeah, you know, one of the ones said early on about a healthy community being prepared really I thought was interesting, because I think, you know, that hits on some of those interrelated ideas you brought up earlier. You know, you could be prepared economically, you can be prepared to address climate change, you can be prepared to plan for housing, you know, so I think that that was a really interesting way of summarizing some of the efforts that we're hoping to get through the general plan update, which obviously is to prepare. We are looking forward and thinking about, you know, how we're going to address issues that we know about and also issues that maybe we don't know about that might emerge over the coming years. So I thought that that was a really interesting way of phrasing it.
That's great. Thank you, Amanda. Anyone else with thoughts on what would be a healthy community in Indian Wells specifically? Right, and Linda emphasized too, being prepared for climate change and air quality, and focusing on air quality as well as part of that being prepared. So that's being prepared in many different ways. All right, and Megan, I see your hand raised. So Megan with De Novo, if you want to just share your piece as well.
Yes, the things that have stood out to me is it seems like there's definitely a desire for some civic spaces and access to green space, whether that's, dog parks were mentioned, pickleball courts, playgrounds. And I think it was mentioned that, these benefit all ages. So, creating opportunities for people of all ages to get outside and have opportunities to get out and enjoy the outdoors.
Wonderful, thank you, Megan. All right, so I'm going to move us on to our next piece here. And again, this is just really a conversation workshop. We want to hear from you, and we want to hear your ideas on what could make Indian Wells a more healthy community here. So I just wanted to bring back, so we've been talking about what's specific in Indian Wells, and then I wanted to bring back our map here and our chart of what a healthy community means and all of the components that go into a healthy community. And Christian was just putting together all of the comments from the chat that we received about what would make Indian Wells a healthy community. So my next question is, are there changes that could be made in Indian Wells to further encourage residents to live a healthy and balanced life? So we just went past some policies, and I'll go through those in a minute, but I just wanted to see, are there changes that could be made in Indian Wells to further encourage residents to live a healthy and balanced life? And I asked that based on all of the items that were just brought forward and what we've defined for ourselves as the healthy Indian Wells. What needs to change to get us to that space? I'll give us a minute to think about it. All right, Suzanne mentioned that like how there are farmers markets now, although she hasn't been. So thinking about maybe a provision for farmers markets. I'm going to go back to the screen here and zoom over for us. All these fun technology tools we discovered during COVID too, just that allow us to have these conversations. So farmers markets, post-COVID planned events for people to gather. So thinking about that, that piece there. Spaces in town where it would seem that benches were meant to be, yet no benches. Seems like this is to discourage interaction or loitering. So I'm going to call out, so there's a couple comments that I've seen, and I might rephrase those as changes that could be made, and let me know if I'm getting those wrong as well. So maybe having provision for spaces for people to gather, and so there might be like an encouragement for people to be in public space, whether it's post-COVID or allowing spaces in public space in town for folks to be with each other, whether it's through physical features like benches or other ways as well. A change could be an idea for a civic park with recreation, with a playground, dog park, pickleball, barbecue. So I'm seeing those community facilities that meet different needs along the way. All right, and as we're brainstorming a couple more, I'm going to go back to the policies that we brainstormed here to think about. So the general plan is, a collection. There's a lot of policies that allow us to build towards some of the vision that we're talking about, and the vision of a healthy community. And so there's a couple I want to highlight here, and I just want to get a check from folks whether these are policies that would make sense in Indian Wells. And again, these are sample policies, and these are things that might, when we say a policy, it could be a change from the status quo right now to what would bring us towards that healthy community that we talked about. So this first one, senior residents, so thinking about prioritizing well-being by working with partners to provide senior facilities. And so thinking about that partnership between the city and different facilities for our senior residents here. The idea of aging in place, that there's community health, safety, and neighborhood cohesiveness by supporting housing and neighborhood amenities that allow people to age in place. So thinking about that there's actually an allowance for a diversity of housing and a diversity of amenities. I see a couple in the chat here that I'm going to bring up. Thinking about those private partnerships and partnerships with folks outside of the city or within the city, but outside of city municipal government. I see working with an Indian Wells hotel to develop community space in unused land. There's a suggestion that next to Miramonte, there might be some vacant space for a community space. And then that right now, folks need to drive outside of Indian Wells to access some resources and facilities that we've talked about to make Indian Wells a healthy community. So going to Rancho Mirage for the library or leaving for a municipal park or tennis court as well. And that folks sometimes have to go to Palm Desert or La Quinta to enjoy outdoor space. I know in Indian Wells, there's a lot of trails and maybe a policy could be enhancing the built environment and maintaining trail systems that supports walkability and interconnected active infrastructure systems. So Linda mentioned walkable streets and park trails. So thinking about what that change could be to allow us that greater mobility. We've talked a lot about recreation types. So providing residents a wide variety of public and private recreational lands, facilities, trails, and amenities. So it's a comprehensive system that can be bound by both private and public recreation opportunities. I love this next comment in the chat here about trail markers. So thinking about accessibility and how folks can know where they're going and how to access the trails and how to access open space. I know that's often an issue for folks in the community who might not know where a trail leads or that there's even one available to them too. So allowing those wayfinding and trail markers as well. All right, so there's I think we're coalescing around the idea of improving trails and improving that walkability. And so it's good to see that from folks and thinking about healthy communities. This last policy on the slide talks about healthcare programs. So thinking about engaging with regional and local healthcare providers to support access to a full range of healthcare facilities. So thinking about what's available for Indian Wells and how residents in Indian Wells can access healthcare facilities regionally if it's not just locally as well. I think we talked about this a little bit in terms of the trail markers and accessibility, but thinking about barriers to access. So what are their informational, maybe that's the knowledge about whether there's amenities or whether there's facilities or resources available, or transportation barriers. And maybe not everyone can drive and maybe not everyone wants to drive to be able to access healthcare services. And so a good note on how we could maybe do that in Indian Wells and a change that could be made as well. The first comment we got and what could change in Indian Wells to lead us towards that vision of what a healthy Indian Wells could look like, healthy and locally grown foods. So thinking about that farmers market or other options that could allow for reducing barriers and increasing access to healthy food in the community. And then also looking at like specific dietary needs that folks might have and how they can access those as well. And I've loved the conversation and back and forth about public spaces in Indian Wells, and that there's the creation and maintenance of those public spaces that are actually within the city and available to all people. I noticed in the chat here, someone mentioned visitor services and information needs to be available in a more public way. Sometimes I think someone mentioned earlier that there's a sense of belonging for folks who are visitors or might be second homeowners or part-time residents. How do you create that sense of belonging? And sometimes that has to do with providing information to people that they actually know what's happening in the city and how to access resources and opportunities in the city as well. I like the creativity, pop-up events in the view, art shows, thinking about how to use our public space. And then a note here that the current IW Community Gardens has a waiting list. And so what if we were able to enlarge the community garden and promote the community garden as well? All right, anyone else have any ideas for a change that could be made in Indian Wells to promote a more healthy community? What needs to change from what currently is to some of those ideas of a healthy community? And I would just, I would just love to hear from folks too and hear your voices. I love facilitating meetings, and I also sometimes feel like a disembodied head talking to folks too. And so as community members, I'd love to just hear anyone talk about what they're thinking about what needs to change in the city to promote healthy communities too. So if anyone is would like to raise your hand and talk about that, it's not too scary. I see Kathy noting providing information on city opportunities at the farmers market. So thinking about that information sharing at places where people already gather. So where people are gathering and providing that information as well. All right, Amanda and Megan, anything you want to dig into a little bit as we're thinking about changes to promote healthy communities?
I think there were a number of comments about how current residents have to go outside of the city to find some of the amenities that they would like to find within Indian Wells. So I think that is interesting, looking at how some of those can be provided more locally.
Great. There was a couple things that we talked about in terms of having resources for folks to age in place, and for resources for folks who are in different age groups as well. As part of the conversation earlier, I don't know if there's any changes that could be made in Indian Wells to encourage that, or folks that could think about of what that would look like for better aging in place and what changes could be made there. See here, a community center facility to be developed to promote spaces for activities, an outdoor retail center with benches, fountains, and water features where people can gather. So I think I'm definitely seeing a need and a desire for that place for people to interact and meet and see each other outside. It definitely promotes community. Any thoughts on serving that full spectrum of community need too? I think the community space and public space really does help answer part of that. All right, my quiet bunch today. I'll wait for a couple of minutes, but we have got so many great ideas and so much for us to talk, think through as we're developing different types of policy. I'm going to go back to the screen here and just remind folks of some things we talked about. So changes that could be made to in Indian Wells to further encourage residents to live a healthy and balanced life. We got a lot of input on that. And thinking about, going back to my board, what healthy communities looks like in Indian Wells. A good variety of options of what that could look like, and seeing some key themes emerge in terms of public space and gathering space for people and recreational opportunities for people all along, with many different resources and many different facilities that could take place in. The need for arts and the need for opportunities to connect with people and healthy foods. Dog parks is big here because it's just 2 words and it takes up a lot more, less, it gets big on the note, but I saw that as being something that folks mentioned is where you can bring your dogs and where you can have those dog parks as well. Thinking about the safety of the community. And as Amanda and Megan mentioned earlier as well, that there are the idea of a prepared community, one that's thinking about all of the aspects of what it means to grow as a community and be prepared with adequate housing supply and environmental resources and fiscal responsibility, and thinking of that sustainability as we move forward. All right, before I move on, anything that we missed in terms of changes that could be made, or anything that popped out to folks that you want to talk about a little more? And you can talk in the chat, you don't have to raise your hand. All right. So just to talk through some of the next steps, we have 2 upcoming workshops after this one. We have a land use alternatives evaluation, and then the draft general plan presentation and comments. Those will come up in the next few months, the dates to be determined. And as Megan mentioned at the beginning, we're just at the beginning of this process and getting input from folks. The project website where you can find more information is indianwells.generalplan.org. It's a great place to find more resources on what the general plan will look like. Christian added that to the chat box, so you can click on that and go there as well. We have just a couple minutes at the end here for some Q&A, and so I'd love to, if anything sparked with folks today, or you want to learn more about the general plan, or ask some specific questions related to the general plan, we'd love to answer that. I see a note in the chat here how we're promoting the workshop and how folks are learning about it. And so I don't know if someone from the seat wants to answer that, or I can begin as well.
I'll feel happy to answer that. This is Michaela Wilkie with the City of Indian Wells. Yeah, we've been sending out emails. So Linda, I'm not sure if you have opted into our email list, but we've sent out about 3 of those. They've also gone out through Nextdoor, through your community Nextdoor. So you should have gotten advertisement through that. It's also being promoted on IWTV, our government channel. So I'm not sure if you tune into that. And then we've also sent it through social media.
And Luis Rubalcaba here, just to add a little bit more to that, the city did set up Indian Wells general plan website separately, where you can go in and also sign up to receive more notifications as to any of the general plan activities. We try to update it on a weekly basis to keep everybody involved as best we can.
I also do see a note about a community survey. That's a great suggestion, and that will be posted and available for the general public and for everyone that's participated in these workshops to comment on. in the coming weeks. So we really just want to make sure that we've given everyone another opportunity to share their ideas. So absolutely, we're going to do an online and printed survey as well, just to make sure everyone has an opportunity to weigh in. And then yes, to comment on everyone spreading the word as well, that would be fantastic. This is, you know, especially some of the topics we talked about today. Hopefully we're leaving today's discussion with some inspiration to connect with our community and promote the health and wellness of our residents. And so to the extent that you could let people know this project is ongoing, that there's going to be continued opportunity for members of the community to weigh in and shape this project. It really is a reflection of the local Indian Wells community. So visiting the website, being able to register their email address, messaging staff directly if that's necessary. We're really available in whatever capacity needs to happen in order to help create that, that input process.
Great, thanks, Amanda. I noted a couple of folks someone asked for a link for IWTV. And so I don't know, Michaela, if we have a link for IWTV or if this will relate with that. And then just a booth at the new farmers market. So thinking about some of those community resources that are coming in the future and can promote healthy communities. And so having that information shared that as well. And then for folks who are snowbirds or second homeowners or coming down to the valley and to Indian Wells part-time, I'm so glad you can join us. It is a benefit of a virtual workshop is that folks can join from anywhere. And so you don't have to be present in the community that day to come to the workshop as well.
This is John Bird, Community Development Director. I would also like to add, we've heard a lot of good suggestions here today. I think everybody is aware that, you know, the city is a very small city. It's almost built out. We have a little bit of vacant land left. And so we're really interested in how we can best utilize that vacant land in the future. And some of these suggestions that are being brought forth today would be good suggestions during our land use discussion for sure. But just to remind everybody that the golf resort has served as a kind of the recreational space for the community from a public standpoint. And right now, we are currently undergoing a master plan of that, or to create a new master plan of new amenities there. And so that's really just going to be getting kicked off here in the near future. And so we would ask that you be involved in that, because we really do want to know what kind of amenities folks are looking for to have included there. And that is a great space and a centralized space that can be used for kind of incorporating some of these suggestions that we're hearing today. Also, with regard to multimodal types of transportation and stuff that have been suggested today, as part of the general plan update, we are hoping to include a couple of some good segments of complete streets. And what that means is that basically the street section can be utilized for not only automobiles, but also cars and golf carts and bicycles and pedestrians. So we're looking at, identifying some appropriate locations for complete streets in our general plan update. And that'll be part of the transportation discussion. But we are hearing what you're saying today, and I think they're all made some really great points. And we appreciate all your participation and look forward to maybe having more people join us for the next workshop. If you can get the word out, that would be great, because really this is contingent on your participation and what we hear from you, so that we can make sure we develop a general plan update that reflects the values and visions of our city residents and our stakeholders. So thank you for that.
Great, thank you, John. We will see, I've noted a couple folks who have added some information to the chat. We'll keep this open for a few minutes too, just if people have any additional questions or want to go back and see some of the things people said about healthy communities. And as a reminder for folks, this is recorded, and we'll be able to have that recording on the website as well for people who couldn't join. This is the contact information for John and Luis as part of the process. Someone noted that sometimes it's hard to give input in a Zoom meeting. And I just want to say thank you all for being here. I know it's a new and interesting way to do a community meeting. We're glad you could join. And as Amanda mentioned earlier, we'll have a survey available in the next couple of weeks that will have information for folks to respond to on the general plan. So we really want to make sure that folks have the opportunity to provide input in many different ways. And so again, we really appreciate you all joining us today. And we'll just hang out for a couple of minutes if folks have any other questions. And thank you all for joining today. All right, I think we'll wrap it up and say thank you all for joining. And again, head to, is it indianwells.generalplan.org for more information. Again, thanks all for joining today. We're going to end the meeting now. Thanks.